Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. All right, we are live today with Brittany Walker, and I'm so excited to have her. She has an amazing story of trauma, pretty much parental trauma with her father, and then some religious trauma throughout. So she is going to tell us her story. Brittany, I'm so thankful that you're here and that you've decided to share with us. I know this is something that people struggle with, and it's not something a lot of people want to talk about or even face.
Yeah.
So thank you
I'm
so much
excited
for
to be
being
here.
here.
Thanks for having me.
So it's funny, Brittany and I work together. We work at a med spa. I work at a med spa one day a week, and I just love the job too much to give it up. And Brittany's an esthetician there, and she does phenomenal skincare. So if you're ever in the need for any skincare advice, she's definitely the one to talk to.
Yes, so as Amber was saying, I am an esthetician here in Cookeville, Tennessee. We just recently bought a new house. We have 2 precious little dogs, and then I am, of course, married to an awesome man. So, yeah.
Yeah, they have a pretty full life. And so Brittany has come a really long way. So this is not how everything started. You definitely are blessed now. But tell us a little bit about your childhood, kind of where this all started, and what that was like.
So, I originally grew up in Lebanon, Tennessee, right outside of Nashville. My childhood started, I didn't have a horrible childhood. My dad was a great father when I was growing up. It's all kind of took a downhill when I turned 12, 13. I grew up in a very religious and authority-based household. My mom and my dad separated when I was 2 weeks old. So my mom was kind of like my safe haven. I have the best mom in the entire world. Still to this day have the best mom in the entire world. But when I would go to my dad's house is when it would get kind of rocky. My dad was a police officer his entire life, military background. And then, like I said, when everything started to go downhill was when he started to become a pastor. My dad is a pastor. His church doesn't know a lot about me. But growing up, it was very, you go by the Bible, you listen to me, and you don't have an option other than that. So I think a big thing for me was when I was at home with my mom, it was very, be a child. It's okay to mess up sometimes. But when I was at my dad's, it was, if you don't do these things, you will be punished. And it was I want to clear this before we get started. I was never physically abused by my dad. But there was a lot of a mental and emotional abuse there. It was you're never going to be good enough kind of thing. When you mess up, it's not okay. It's not, accidents don't happen. This is not right. And this is not how it's going to be. And a big thing that I remember as a child was that when my dad wanted to know information, my stepmom would take us to Sonic and we would go get ice cream. We would come home. She would send us upstairs. She would go and tell him anything that he wanted to know, the information that she got out of us. And then we would be brought downstairs into his office and we would be prayed over and then we would be reprimanded. So he had a paddle that would hang above the wall or above his desk. He would pull that down, place his hand over us, pray over us. And then essentially we would be whipped with a paddle and then sent back upstairs, and we weren't allowed to come down after that. So it was a lot.
So religious punishment, or when people use religion, do you feel like there was some of that where he was using religious to kind of punish you
Absolutely.
guys?
Um, it was a very big thing in our household. Um, you would actually hear him speaking in tongues, because our room was here and his office was underneath our bedroom, and us as in my sister. Um, you would hear him speaking in tongues, and then he would come to the end of the stairs, and you would hear Brittany Elizabeth, and then that's when all the discipline and all of that would start. Um, and then it was, you have to live this way and this way and this way. You can't dress this way. You can't show yourself in, like, I couldn't wear tank tops and take pictures in them at a certain angle because it was ungodly and I was showing my body too much and I was asking for men to look at me and things like that. But then on the other hand and a lot of people don't know this about me, is I would be at my dad's and I would deal with all this trauma and then immediately would come home. And my mom was married to an alcoholic at the time, and he would verbally abuse me, and tell me, you're never going to amount to anything. The big thing was, you're going to be as big as a house one day. And then on top of that was, God's not real. Why are you doing these things? Um, so it was like I would go here, and it's like religious, like torture almost. And then would go home to my mom, and my mom didn't know the extent of it by any means. It was very hidden. Um, and he would tell me, like, why are you doing these things? So it was like a back and forth thing for me as a kid, and that was hard for me.
So you're getting conflicting information from one parental figure to the other parental father figure. So that's hard enough for a child to navigate through. And I have an issue where I feel like when people hide behind religion to do things, it's like I understand that you want to be right and you want to do right and you want to teach your kids right. But, sometimes as parents, I know we do the best we can as parents, but it still doesn't constitute this. And I want to ask you, do you think there was a level of narcissism in
Absolutely.
there?
Another thing that kind of made me realize that this is not, because for the longest time I thought, oh, he's just trying to be a good parent. He's just trying to discipline me the only way he knows how. Um, a big thing for me was that I had mentioned it to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I don't feel safe going over here. I don't feel comfortable going over here. Um, and she had reached out to him and was like, hey, Brittany's not super comfortable when she comes over there. She feels like it's all about, you know, you do as I say, you listen to me, and there is no other option. Why don't you sit down, watch a movie with her one day? Y'all go do something fun. And his response was, she can do whatever she wants to at your home. And that has caused her to act the way that she acts. So when she is at my house, it is only about discipline.
There again, like to me, I did a big study with narcissism in the church, and I believe that this is a spiritual thing that happens in a lot of churches among a lot of people in the church, where it's like it's almost like a narcissistic spirit that attaches to them, and they start reacting in that certain kind of way where the blame is never it's never on them, it's always
Yes.
on someone else. So it sounds to me like there was a level of like he's attacking you, and it's almost like he's doing it to
Mm-hmm.
attack your mom. I mean, especially based on that particular statement, because he's saying things like that to your mom. So it's almost like, well, it's your fault that
Yeah.
she's this
And it
way.
got to the point growing up that my mom, like, he wouldn't speak to my mom when it came to me. She had to speak to my stepmother, because, once again, that is his ex wife. Religion doesn't allow that. This is his wife. You speak to her. So that was hard too, because it was like I could tell my mom things in confidence and she would want to bring it to his attention, but couldn't, because she wasn't allowed to speak to him. So that makes it hard too.
I really don't understand that type of philosophy. And I feel like if you're going to be so legalistic about every single thing, then you have to be legalistic about it all. Like saying some things are okay and then not other things, that's not, so you pick and choose what you
Yeah,
want
that
to.
was a big thing in our household was you can't do these things, but if I want to, I can with him. And that was confusing as well. And as I got older, um, and you start to think about things the older you get, and things start to make more sense the older you get. Or I thought. So I'm going to transition a little bit into when I got like 16, 17 years old. When I got to that age in my brain, and it took me a long time to get out of this. I mean, even just up into 3 years ago, when I met my husband, it was if my dad can't love me, why would anybody else love me? And now, as an adult, I see that that is not how that works. But growing up, that's what I thought. So as I got older, started to make some decisions that probably were not the best. I was running around looking for love in places that were not great. I did a lot of things that are questionable. But I wanted so badly for someone to love me, like a man to love me, because you can't get it at home, so get it somewhere else. Um, and then at that point, that's when my life kind of took a very spiraled turn for me. I was very suicidal. I tried to commit suicide when I was younger, because of this. Because, like I said, if my own dad doesn't love me, no one else will ever love me. And that was a very hard time in my life. No one knew that I tried to commit suicide. It was a failed attempt, obviously, but I didn't tell anyone until I think I told my mom when I turned 21 or 22. She even had no idea. So it was a very hard time for me because I felt very lost. I didn't feel like I knew myself.
Yeah, I can see that. I want to back up for 1 second. I want to ask you a question. Did your dad ever address to you, like, he had all of these stipulations about how you should be, but did he ever talk to you about the divorce between him and your
No.
mom or the
So that
separation?
wasn't something we talked about. My dad is actually on his fifth marriage. My mom was his first. Um, it wasn't a conversation. My mom in general wasn't a conversation in the house. It just wasn't an option.
So that's a problem. You have an authoritative, like, um, kind of ruling in your house, but you never talk about your own sins or the things that you mistakes. I mean, we all may have mistakes, but you never talk about that or never address that, and that's a problem. And I can see how these kinds of things push people, children, especially children, because we're still so formative in those years, how it can push someone into this area of no one loves me. I'm looking for love in all the wrong places, and I'm going in this downward spiral into a place that of darkness to is ultimately could result in suicidal
Yeah,
ideations or thoughts.
it was a big thing. I just felt so lost that I was like, what do I do at this point? And then, so I guess I had told you earlier, I pushed religion away for a long time. I wouldn't go to church. I didn't pray. And then one day I sat back and I was like, this isn't God. God doesn't want my life to be this way. And I did a lot of soul searching. I did a lot of praying. I started going back to church. Um, and that helped me heal a lot.
Yeah, because you start to fill those voids, those especially religious voids, which is kind of like how we are supposed to know God is through the Father, because He is our Father. That's supposed to be the representation of that relationship on earth. And so when your Father does not treat you that way, you look to God like, is this how
Right.
you feel about me? Um, so when those relationships, I feel like when they start to get redeemed in the church, God starts to redeem those relationships. It does provide healing to you. Um, so talk to me a little bit about, like, what was the journey from the time of, like, you feeling like you wanted to commit suicide to the process of finding church? Like, tell me some of the emotions, some of the things that you dealt with in that process.
So a
Um,
big thing was, so this is kind of where it started, was my mom was, and she still at this point didn't know the extent of things. But I remember she was still making me go to church. Um, I remember one Sunday, she took me down to the altar and we prayed, and I could tell something was wrong. I didn't know what, but she was, just sobbing. And I was like, what has happened? And I get home and my dad is in the driveway because I had done all of these things and I was so out of control. I think I was 16. She was going to send me to his house because she didn't know what else to do. She was like, I can't handle this anymore. And I get that now as an adult. I was completely out of control. And like I said, she didn't know the extent. If she would have known the extent, that would have never have been an option. But that was the first point of like, you've got to change something because you can't go live there. You can't. It's not an option. I could not withstand that 24/7. And then another thing was I'm very fortunate. I see this as a blessing in my life. I always get a little emotional when I talk about this person. My Uncle Bob was the only father figure that I have ever had in my life. He is the most amazing human that I've ever met. And he is also a big part of the church. So he was always leading me back. This is not the way you want your life to be. Let me take you to church. Let me and your Aunt Penny take you to church. And so I feel like he kind of gave me that push that I needed. Like, you're not alone. He's the one at my wedding that I did my first look with. He has always been very important to me, but I think that he is a very important part of my story as well, because without him, I don't think that I would be as where I am today, at least in my, religion and my, how I navigate life at this point, because he was almost like my saving grace of, let me help you, pick you up and show you that this is what God is truly like and how much he actually does care about you. So I'm very fortunate in that. I did go through this trauma, but I did have, on the other hand, this amazing godly father figure also.
I know that your heart is to share this because you really want to help other people, bring awareness to this and help and mostly, young people that have to go through these kinds of things and have to deal with this kind of inconsistency. And like in your case, like in any case, I mean, it kind of turns you against church. What advice do you have, like, for someone who might be in the middle of that? Because one of the reasons I ask this too is because one of the hardest forms of abuse, I feel like, is family abuse, where you are stuck in that household for X amount of time and there's no escaping. You can't go away. And you're enduring this day in and day out for an extended period of times,
Yeah, you
years,
can't get away from it. I mean, you
Um,
can, but that's how it feels, is that you can't get away from it. Um, a big thing is finding somebody, whether that be a pastor at your church or that being a teacher at school, because a lot of it still happens to adults, but it's more apt to happen to children. Find somebody that you feel like you can trust and that you can listen to, or that will listen to you, and let them know, like, hey, I may not. And I think there's a big, like, confusion when people think, oh, you're not like really being abused at home because your parents aren't hitting you, or your parents aren't this or that. The way that I feel is that even though I wasn't technically physically abused, I feel like I was physically abused. And I feel like kids will almost internalize that as, well, I'm not being beat at home, so it's not that important. It is important, because I didn't think that it was important when I was a kid. I didn't even tell my mom. She knew a little bit, but
mhm.
it was never a, this is a problem, and it is a problem, and somebody needs to know about it. Whether, like I said, whether that be somebody at your church, or a teacher, or another parent that you can trust. and hope that they get you out of that situation.
And I think too, like, of every problem we face in life, if we have an awareness of this problem, like we know, like, first is knowing there's a problem. And if we don't know there's a problem, and this is what makes it hard with teenagers or young people, they don't they don't know, they really don't have enough life experience to say this is right and
Right.
this is wrong. And when it's a parent who you look up to, or you should look up to, this is someone who's raised you, they've given,
It's all you
given you a place to
know.
live, supporting you. It's all you know. So it's really hard, but I think that if people can, well, there's two things. One, the young people, if they can talk about these things. Sometimes there's embarrassment surrounded with these things, but just being able to share with an adult and not and let go of the shame around it so that an adult can navigate this is what's
Exactly.
right and what's wrong. And then secondly, like, for adults that's in the lives of these children to question.
And even now, you know, I haven't spoken to my dad in 6 years. Um, that doesn't mean that I don't love him. You know, I came from him. Um, I can't, for my own mental health and sanity, have him in my life. Nor does he want to be in my life. But
Mhm.
um, there was a shame around it. It wasn't. You're very right about that. I'm like, if I tell my mom, and she wouldn't have, like I said, as an adult, I see that, but as a child, I was like, well, she's just going to say, get over it. You know, you're tough. You know, he's just parenting you. That's how it is, and that's not how it is. You know, but in my brain, it was like, well, maybe I am the one that's the problem.
I think having that person like you had your uncle that was your source of stability, and I think if people can find that in any circumstance, but especially if you're dealing with issues at home, and there's going to be conflict between
Absolutely,
parent and child, especially with teenagers, but if you can find that one person that you can confide in, because you have to know, like, what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. And I just feel like we live in such a culture now where things are so skewed. It's like it's so important to focus on mental health, especially in our children. They're our next generation.
absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about, like, who you are today from as a result of all of these things that has happened to you. What have you learned in the process? What things have you kind of took from this whole
Yeah. So
experience?
I actually have a letter, and this was kind of my. I only discovered this letter probably almost a year ago. This was a letter from 17 days before I turned 18. I had decided, let me give you a little backstory on it. I had decided that I was going to change my last name to my mom's maiden name because I didn't want to be associated with that name anymore, my last name. And I felt like it was kind of a break free moment for me. But when I discovered this letter, this was my like, okay, Brittany, it's time to become your own person. You've created this beautiful life. It's essentially time to show him that you have created something without him, and you can do it by yourself. So I'm going to read this letter. But like I said, this was 17 days before my 18th birthday, and attached to it was my mom's last um, child support check. So I'm going to read this really quick. It's very short. My mom's name is Amy. It says Amy. Brittany tells me that it is her intent to change her last name when she turns 18. This troubles me. It troubles me because she also tells me the reason that she hasn't done it already is because you all believe I would create a problem if she were to do it prior to 18. I assure you, I will not. In fact, I believe it may be a good idea. You have raised her to disregard authority, and I'm certain that this will create a huge problem for her in her future. It would probably be best that you use her last name as I've spent many years trying to clean mine. And then the end of it says, attached to this letter, you will find Brittany's last child support payment for May of 2014. I would only want Brittany to know that she is loved very much and that the door is always open at my house. However, this is the kicker for me. However, it is only open to when there is acknowledgement of authority and personal accountability. And I read this letter as a 26-year-old and was like, this isn't normal. This is not okay. And for a long time, authority scared me. In his brain, um, I was pushing authority. I was not listening to authority. In reality, I was scared of authority. Um, so let's kind of transition into now. Um, I, I sat back the other day and I looked around and I breathed and I was like, I have created a beautiful life from what I came from. I have the most amazing husband in the entire world. I have this big, beautiful house. I'm, 26 years old, and making almost six figures. It is, I did that by myself, you know, and that was a big thing for me. I did that. He didn't do that. Authority figures didn't do that. I decided that this is the time that I'm going to pick myself up. I'm not going to be a victim anymore, and I'm going to make this life what I want it.
I mean, that's beautiful in so many reasons. But I have to be honest, like I'm a little stuck on this letter. That's the
Yeah.
first time I had heard that letter. And I know you have mentioned it to me, but I had not heard it before. And I I could be wrong here, but to me it sounds extremely
Oh,
narcissistic.
100%.
Extremely. Because where is the accountability for the 5 marriages that he's had? Where is the accountability for the role model that he had been to you? And I get that we make mistakes and we have sins and he's trying to clean his name up. But the very first thing that you need to do is ask for
100%.
forgiveness. Has he gone back and asked for, I mean, and again, I don't want to like tear him down. Obviously, he's not here to defend himself. But I was faced with this verse in the Bible when I was going through some of my stuff, which is we don't fight flesh and blood. We fight rulers and principalities, and can't quote that verse exactly, but I
Right.
know that verse very well. I know the gist of it, and it's like there is an active agenda in the church to tear down the the authority of God. And when someone gets on this high horse of authority, when they're not the ones that should, yes, you have a respect for your elders, have a respect for your church, but never rule like that. And especially if you're not taking accountability for
Yeah.
your own
And
things.
I think a big thing for me too was when I finally, because as a child, I wanted so badly to have a dad. I saw my friends, they would be with their dads, they'd be doing, the daddy daughter dates and this and that. I didn't have that. But so it was 6 years ago, I had reached out to my dad, and we were meeting for coffee, um, I think it was once a week, and we were trying to rekindle something, even if it was just something small. Um, and I remember I had reached out to him. It was a Saturday night, and I said, "Hey, I feel like we're going really well." And I keep in mind, I had defended him to my family when this started. I was like, "I really think he's changed." Da 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 da. And my family, on my mom's side, was like, "Just be careful." And so I had reached out to him. It was on a Saturday night, and I said, "Hey, I would love to come to your church on Sunday morning, if you don't care." And then come to find out, his wife did not know that we had been meeting. I was told that I wasn't welcome at his church, and that at that point was this. This isn't going to work. This isn't healthy for you, Brittany. And so at that point, that point, I have not spoken to him since. And my life, I feel like I got my life back because of that. I'm able to breathe. I don't have to worry about the constant scrutiny, or you're doing this wrong or you're doing that wrong. I can be me. It's okay to make mistakes. Even as an adult, it's okay to make mistakes. It took me a long time to learn that, but now that I'm here, I feel so free because of it.
That's so good, and I'm very proud of you, because there does come a time in our lives where we have to wake up and say, "This person is not good for my mental health," and you know, it's unfortunate, especially when it's family members and someone that you love and you want to rekindle that with. But I do think sometimes if it's not healthy, it's better to
Just
just go
end it.
ahead and sever that relationship, and you still have your mental health. And you have such a blessed life at your age. You've accomplished so much. And I know this girl. she is she's on fire for just making people feel beautiful, making people look beautiful. And you we all go through things as teenagers and kids. And I hope that no one ever makes you feel less than enough, because
Well,
you
thank you.
totally
I
are.
feel like, so shout out to Fire and Ice. That's where we work. That's where we work in Cookville. I think that that's helped me a lot. And I've even told Sean, which is our boss, great, amazing human, by the way. I have told her, I'm like, Fire and Ice saved me. I started there a little over 2 years ago. I work with such an amazing group of women that are all about women empowerment, and you are nothing less. And me and Sean actually sat down and had a conversation a few days ago about how I feel like my trauma sometimes is not as important as other people's trauma. And she made it very clear to me that everyone's trauma is very important and that I shouldn't feel any less because of what happened to me. But she and Amber and all the other girls that we work with it's all the time. We just all love each other. But I think too that it's helped me a lot because I get to love on other women and men too. I will have women come in sometimes and just from touch will start to cry on my table because they don't feel that anymore. And I love my job. I love to, my saying is I can do 10 facials in a day, but if I change one person's outlook on life or their attitude for the day, my job is done. I could do one facial, make them feel like they are the most beautiful person on the planet or boost their confidence a little bit. I could walk out the door and be fine for the rest of the day. That's what I care about. And I think a lot of that comes from the trauma that I did go through because I didn't feel that way growing up. And, I have these little girls come in and, you can do something as small as like just put a mask on them and they feel like they're on top of the world. And that to me is the most rewarding job in the entire world. So,
I think you've hit on something so important. There is power in touch. And I was just having this conversation with someone, I think yesterday, about how we use our story, the things that happen to us in our lives, our circumstances, and a lot of times our passion is born out of that. So we discover this newfound passion and love, and like, this is what I'm here to do, and this makes me feel good. And in doing that and providing that help and that assistance for someone else, you also heal
for
in the
sure.
process. It's such a beautiful kind of thing. And another reason why, like, I honestly feel so passionate about people sharing their stories. And you said this, you touched on the fact that your trauma, you don't feel like it's like everyone else's. No one's trauma is the same. And I I just had this conversation. I think it's the same person, but we were talking about how different trauma, like, we can call it whatever. We can call it trauma, we can call it circumstances, experiences, whatever. But everybody that has gone through something that has got them down, and you might go through something and I might go through the exact same circumstance, and to you it's traumatic and
Right.
to me it's not, or vice versa. But the truth of the matter is, what happened to us and how we perceived it, and emotionally, if we've had to fight to overcome it, that's still overcoming. That's still transformational. And that's still triumphant. When you're at the end of that and you're like, hey, this changed me as a person. And this has made me who I am today. And this is crafted. I had this pain and now I've made it
Right.
passion or
And
purpose.
I think a big thing for me too with sharing my story is that I want, you know, especially little girls, because I remember myself as a little girl thinking I'm so alone. Um, Whether, you know, it's a grown woman or it's a little girl or a little boy, or, you know, anybody can go through this trauma. They're not alone. Whether, you know, it's both parents or whatever, you can find resources. And you know, whether that be me or Amber, or, you know, we're always here. And that's a big thing for me. I always want to be like an open door and a listening ear to someone that feels like they're stuck. um, and if I, you know, if you need help, then we'll help you. But that's a big reason for the things that I do, is because, you know, in my work at least, I have, you come back to my room, it's just me and you back there. You know, you can tell me something and it's going to stay with me. And if you need help, then we'll find you a way to get help. It's a lot easier, I feel like, sometimes for people to open up to me because they do feel safe. And that's a big part of, you know, my space, is that I want you to feel safe when you come in, and that you can trust me with anything. So
And I'm actively working to put together resources for all these different areas. Of course, there's so many different things that we experience, different types of trauma that people experience, but I am I'm really actively trying to put together a resource guide so that people that have whatever circumstances or whatever they've been through, they can go and say, "Hey, I can go here, I can go there." Um, because that is, you touched on something so important. I don't want people to
yeah,
feel like they're alone. We are all in this human thing together, and we all go through hills and valleys, and we can be on the hilltop and offer someone else assistance, or we can be in the bottom and have someone help us. And we also have to be in that receiving side too, that says, hey, I need help
it's so
in this
important
moment,
to realize,
you know.
to realize that you need help and to ask for help. That's the biggest and scariest part of all of this, is admitting that I need help. And that's what's hard for me. I'm a very humble person. I don't want anybody, you know, a lot of the times to know anything's wrong, or but everybody needs help sometimes, and that's okay. You know, that's a big thing that I had to learn,
Mhm.
was whether it's something to you that might be small or something to you that might be big, it's okay to ask for help.
So, Brittany, well, is there anything else that you want to add? I would ask you if you have any resources or anywhere to send people, but you kind of already gone over that. But is there anything else that you want to add to tell people, or you want to leave people with before we
Just know
close?
that, you know, your self-worth is more than you will ever know. And that can be hard sometimes when you go through trauma, especially parental trauma. But that doesn't define you, and it won't ever define you. And don't let it define you. You know, you're your own person. And a big thing for me was, it helped me a lot because, one, I'm a little bit of a cocky person, but I wanted to prove him wrong, you know. And, you know, you have so much self-worth. You've just got to realize what you have.
And I have a mentor that says the best revenge is success. So when you're able to go above and beyond, even though someone's tried to tear you down, and you build a successful life, and success could be anything. It could be anything that whatever that person was trying to hold you back from. He was trying to hold back love. And it's like, but you went and created this life of
Exactly.
success, because now you have a successful marriage. You have a successful job where you're helping show love and feel love by giving it. So it's a beautiful thing. And it's not, if there's anybody out there that's struggling with these things, like, it's not the end. Your life has worth, and you have worth, and you can fight through these things, and you can rebuild. I thank you for this conversation, because I don't, you never know who's struggling. And I agree with you. If you touch just one, it's.
It's all worth it.
Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode, or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our transformation project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.